All right, today we're doing something a little different. We're going backwards in time. Because while everyone's busy chasing the newest UCS sets and the latest limited edition drops, some of the biggest LEGO investment returns in history actually came from sets released 20, 30, even 40 years ago. And that's what we're looking at today. We're breaking down 10 vintage LEGO sets that have delivered serious long-term returns, and also, more importantly, we're going to talk about why they performed the way they did. Because if you're serious about LEGO investing, the fastest way to spot the future is by understanding the past. Before we get into the list, let's quickly define something. What actually counts as vintage LEGO? Generally, we're talking about sets that are at least 20 years old, so late 70s, 80s, 90s, and even early 2000s at this point. And vintage LEGO tends to have a few things in common. Parts that aren't made anymore. Themes that evolved or completely disappeared. Early minifigure designs. Shorter production runs. And massive nostalgia. These sets aren't just old toys. They're snapshots of LEGO history. And that historical significance, that's what drives value long term. So why does vintage LEGO do so well? There are really three big forces at play. First, rarity. These sets simply don't exist in large numbers anymore, especially sealed. Every year more get opened, lost, parted out, or damaged. Supply keeps shrinking. Second, nostalgia. The kids who grew up in the 80s and 90s are now in their 40s or 50s. They've got disposable income, and they want the sets they couldn't afford when they were kids. That emotional pull is real, and it moves markets. Third, their track record. Some vintage LEGO sets have quietly outperformed traditional investments. Not overnight, not in hype cycles. They compound. Slowly, consistently, relentlessly. And that's the pattern we're about to see. Let's start with set 375, the Yellow Castle. This isn't just an old LEGO set. This is foundational. One of the first major castle releases and one of the earliest to include minifigures. It helped define what LEGO storytelling even looked like. Back in 1978, it retailed for about $113. Today, a sealed copy goes for around $7,000. That's more than a 6,000% increase, averaging roughly 9.4% growth per year. Now, here's what's interesting. It wasn't explosive. It didn't spike overnight. It just steadily climbed for nearly 50 years. And that pattern, slow, consistent appreciation, is something you're going to see again. Fast forward to the late 80s, and we will now look at a set from the pirate theme. The Black Sea's Barracuda had everything. Multiple decks, captain's cabin, cannons. It wasn't just a set, it was an adventure. Originally $110. Today, around $2,578 sealed. That's about 10% annual growth. A flagship pirate set plus heavy nostalgia equals strong long-term performance. And speaking of firsts that shape entire themes, set 1182 Café Corner is an ancient history. It's from 2007, but it might be one of the most important modern sets ever released. Why? Because it launched the modular buildings line. Originally $140, today it's sitting around $485 sealed. That's over 20% average annual growth, which is huge. And the reason is simple. It created an ecosystem. Once collectors committed to modulars, they had to go back and get the first one. And that first-in-theme effect, it shows up again and again. Now let's go back to classic space. The original Galaxy Explorer with its trans-yellow windows, red and white astronauts, that retro sci-fi optimism that just feels timeless. It retailed for about $32. Today, sealed copies are over $5,000. That's around 12% annual growth. This was one of the defining sets of early LEGO space. And when something defines an era, collectors remember. Now let's talk about something that defines scale. The original UCS Millennium Falcon. Over 5,000 pieces, massive presence, limited production. When this released, it wasn't just big, it was historic. It launched at $500. Today, it's about $2,529 sealed. That's roughly 11% annual growth. Star Wars plus flagship status plus sheer size creates a long-term heavyweight. King's Castle came from the classic gray castle era, with its drawbridge towers and full medieval energy. Originally $53. Today, it's nearly $3,000 sealed. That's about 10.7% annual growth. Again, not flashy, not hype-driven, just steady appreciation. The airport shuttle monorail from 1990 was part of a set Lego never truly replaced. It was mechanical, different, and completely unique in the lineup. Originally priced at $140, today it's around $4,382 sealed. That's almost 11% annual growth. When Lego retires a unique play system entirely, scarcity kicks in hard. But not every vintage set grows at double digits. Take the inner city passenger train. Electronic train, working lights, real-world realism. It originally retailed for $234. Today it's around $1,800 sealed. That's roughly 4.8% annual growth. Not explosive, but steady. And that's an important reminder. Vintage doesn't automatically mean massive returns. Some sets just grind upward over decades. Now let's shift back to bold 90s energy, where we're looking at the Lego Megacore Magnetizer from 1990. Magnets, neon colors, that unmistakable early 90s futuristic vibe. Originally $60, today around $1,100 sealed. Roughly 9% annual growth. Strong theme identity, rare parts, nostalgia, it's a powerful mix. And that brings us back to pirates one more time. The Skull's Eye schooner from 1993 was another pirate legend. Massive ship, huge display presence, a true centerpiece set. Originally $127, today around $3,253 sealed. About 11% annual growth. And if there's one pattern that keeps repeating across decades, it's this. Large flagship pirate sets consistently perform well in the vintage market. Here's the big takeaway. None of these sets doubled in 2 years. They compounded over decades. Most of them sit in that 8 to 12% annual growth range. That's the sweet spot. And the strongest performers tend to fall into a few categories. First in theme sets. Iconic ships and castles. Massive licensed flagships. Unique play systems. The pattern matters more than the specific set. If you're buying vintage Lego, condition is everything, and the original box matters, completeness matters, and also patience matters. This is long-term investment, not quick flips. Vintage Lego investing isn't about hype. It's about nostalgia. It's about understanding what collectors will still care about 20 years from now. These 10 sets prove Lego can absolutely function as a serious alternative asset when chosen carefully. If you want to track values and analyze growth rates, head over to Investabrick.com. And let us know in the comments, if money wasn't a factor, which vintage Lego set would you buy today? As always, like, subscribe, and we'll see you in the next video.